Good morning, this is Luke with Austin's Appliance Service. It's Friday, so I wanted to do another, what we've been calling Gospel Friday. But I also wanted to mention, don't forget, or, if you've missed it, I did start a new series of stories. I know a lot of people have liked the stories. I'm calling it my blooper reel, where I've made mistakes in the past. So I wrote that one late at night, though, and sometimes things that get posted at night don't seem to get the same circulation as when I post them first thing in the morning. So, just wanted to make you guys aware of that. But this morning, I've made reference a couple times to it, but I haven't really fully explained how the Lord saved me. And so I thought today I'd kind of try to explain how I came to Jesus and, what many refer to as a testimony. In John chapter 4, there's this woman at the well, and Jesus is having a conversation with her. And, he's essentially telling her her sin. He knows about all these men she's been with. And she goes back. She leaves her water pot. She goes back, and she tells the others, come see this man. He told me everything. He knows everything. He's told me everything about myself. And it says later in that chapter that many believed on him for the testimony of the woman that she testified. He told me all things ever I did. So there is an ability to communicate the gospel through a testimony, how people came to the Lord. And this is murky water, I guess you'd say. There's a lot of testimonies I've listened to out there that talk about religious experiences. They talk about things they did. They talk about going forward. They talk about, I've heard some weird ones, like some wonky, really outlandish, really what it boils down to is it had nothing to do with sin or salvation. It had to do with absolutely nothing to, visions and signs and wonders and very odd things. So, I wanted to share mine, but I hesitate, because so many people are kind of turned off to hearing, if you've been in religious circles, or if you've listened to people in religious circles, so much of it is ghost stories. And so I hope mine doesn't come across that way. And you have to understand that we talked about it earlier, Matthew 7. There's many that call him Lord but don't really know him. There's a lot of Christianity out there today that's associated with those ones that call him Lord but don't really know him. And so what they're communicating is also very odd. But anyways, now that I got that all out of the way, so I did not grow up, in a church-going home. I grew up in a home that was a good home. It was I had a mom and a dad. It was a moral home. It was, for all things outside of a Christian upbringing, it was a good home. I have no complaints about my childhood. I have no hidden traumas in my past. I wasn't abused or damaged in some way, which is, you hear about that so often today. But, I had every privilege and every reason to turn out good, I guess you'd say, as a lot of people would kind of assess that situation. But I went to college on a baseball scholarship. And up until that point, baseball was the pursuit of my life, and life had a meaning. Life had purpose then, right? Because this is the pursuit of my life. I wasn't going to college to go to school or to get an education. I was going to continue to play baseball. And I got injured. And when I was injured and came home from college, it was shortly thereafter I realized that life had lost its meaning. I had no real purpose to life anymore. I was an adult. I was expected to go out and get a job and go on my own. But at the same time, I really didn't have any reason anymore, right? I worked in a fiberglass plant at that time, and I hated it. Like, I just stood on a factory line, did the same thing over and over every day, and it was so monotonous and so awful. And, I started getting into the party scene. Because I really just didn't have... That was kind of like what people did where I'm from. They still do. You know, you get old enough to go drink in the woods and then when you can turn 21, you can go drink in the bar, and this is the pursuit of most people's lives, right? And so I kind of followed the pattern. I started using marijuana quite frequently. I became quite a drinker at that time. And so I was in the party crowd and in the party scene at that time. And during that time, I had a child. Outside of marriage, and that situation was is to this day the hardest thing I've ever gone through. There was a lot of pain, a lot of hurts, a lot of things, hard, and we fought, and I was a child, and and I look back at things now, and I realize that a lot of the issues were very obviously my fault. But at that time, of course, nothing's my fault. Young, stupid, it's her fault. So we fought over a kid. And we fought over a kid for years. And that was, that part of my life. And so finally I asked her to move out. And because I couldn't, we didn't like each other. We couldn't stand each other. A very, very messed up situation. And when that happened, it was kind of like I had this license to dive even deeper into sin. At that time, up until that point, I was a weekend partier. After that, I became an everyday drunk. If there's probably people that'll watch this from where I'm from that know, I used to be in Traveler's Bar every single day. I'd get out of work and I'd be at the bar, and I had a bar stool that everybody knew that was my bar stool. And they knew my drink. I didn't have to order it because I was in there so much. And that particular point in my life, the drunkenness, the drug use, the debauchery, the fornication or sleeping around is much more commonly used. Everything exponentially increased at that time because I was in this pit of self-pity. It was self-pity made a great avenue for me to just go into a very dark place and remain there a very long time. And I was there for probably 5 years. I probably was in that place of just constantly drunk, waking up hungover, thinking that why did I do this to myself, and then do it again the very next night. And it was a lot of places waking up where I shouldn't have woke up, next to people I shouldn't have woke up next to. A lot of that, I still look back at that part of my life with a lot of shame. And in this whole time, of course, I'm not really seeing my kid as much as I should be. Very inconsistent here and there. And that situation between his mom and I was only worse because she wouldn't let me take him anywhere, and because she didn't trust me, because I was, everybody knew it. I was a notorious drunk, right? I mean, who's going to send their kid off with the notorious drunk? So that's kind of the situation that I'm in, and I'm drinking all the time, and I finally just kind of got worn out with that lifestyle. I didn't have some epiphany. I didn't make some determination to reform my life or turn over a new leaf. I had just gotten worn out with that lifestyle. And about that time, as I'm kind of coming out of that, I reconnected with a girl that I was crazy about the first time I met her, but she ran off on me, and of course she's my wife today. But I reconnected with her, and the situation was right this time where things moved very quickly to marriage. If her dad would have really known what I really was, he should have told me no. I would, of course, I approached her dad, and I lied through my teeth and told him how great of a guy I was, and they gave the A-OK on getting married to their daughter, and we get married. And for, a short time, there's that initial honeymoon phase where things are good. Well, pretty soon, though, she started to see that I really wasn't the person I tried to project being. I was a mean, cruel person. Very spiteful, very hurtful, and I began to tear her down, I guess you'd say. And, the crazy thing is the whole time I'm thinking we're good. Happy, we're happy. Like, I was so oblivious. I think this is a common stupidity among all men. If things are good in the moment, things are good. You hear that a lot from women. If you have any connection to other women outside of your marriage, like my wife, yeah, my wife and I have a friend who we talk to, and her husband's oblivious, right? I mean, like, that she's struggling with these things, and he has no idea. I think that's kind of a common stupidity among men. But I had that stupidity where, as long as I wasn't getting yelled at, things are good, right? But the whole time my wife is being destroyed. She's being eaten up by all my spiteful, cruel words. And I never physically abused her, but, I was very emotionally and verbally abusive with her. And, of course, at the time, if somebody told me that, I would have said, no, I'm not. I'm so nice to her. I'm so good to her. And it's so weird, the deception I was in, right? And so this continues for 3-4 years. Well, our marriage is deteriorating, and I lived the life of a drunken party boy who slept around all the time. That damage that I did to myself in that previous time was starting to manifest itself in me again. In other words, I didn't know how to be happy in a good thing with one woman. I didn't know how to be she was so good to me all that time, and I was awful to her. And I just couldn't be content within a marriage with one woman, with a great wife, because I had kind of, like, in a sense, what's the word? I was almost like gluttonous in a fornication kind of way. I consumed that in a way like I was always on to the next person. And I don't want to say too much. I don't want to be too gross. I don't want to glorify that. That is a lifestyle of a lot of misery, sadness, no satisfaction, a constant pining away. Because you're never satisfied where you are. You're always on to the next thing. But anyways, I don't want to get too deep into that. But that person was wanting back out of the cage. I had caged him to be married. I had put him away to be married. And I can't contain him. And pretty soon, as our marriage is deteriorating, I'm starting to voice this. I'm starting to let this guy out a little bit. And as things got worse, I'm just plainly telling my wife, I want to cheat on you. Which is, of course, was destroying her. And this is who I am. And all the time, the whole time, I don't know how many times she'd come to me broken. I'm hurting and expressing to me that I'm just killing her. And I'm thinking, what's wrong with you? We're good. Like, it's an insanity. It's nuts. I was so blind. Pride is the sin of pride is so inherent in us that we cannot see ourselves right. We could never be the one at fault, right? Anyways, I'm expressing these things to my wife. I'm hurting her terribly. I'm doing these things that are just killing her. And I can vividly remember, it's like an image that got burned in my brain. I still remember my wife going to bed the night the Lord saved me. It's like one of those, if you were to see it like an artistic depiction, like you see this joyful thing, and then to depict misery, it's like you sucked all the color out of the picture. My wife didn't even have the same color in her cheeks. Like, it's like the life had been drained out of her. I was initially drawn to her when we first met because she had such a vibrant smile and such a kind and compassionate and gentle disposition. And I was ruining her, and I stole that. I stole the thing that drew me to her, her smile. I stole it from her. I mean, I'm literally a monster in my own marriage. And that night she goes to bed. And I remember the date. It was November 30th of 2014. I just happened to know that because it was a Sunday night. I wasn't a churchgoer or anything, and so I'm not up listening to some preacher or anything like that. I'm sitting there in my chair. She's gone to bed, just looking terrible. And it was a TV preacher, nobody that I endorse. And nothing that he said was communicating anything that... All it was this communication. Because I had heard the gospel in the past, but what did they have to do with me? Because I'm a good person. But all it was this communication that of Jesus coming back. And it struck me that night that if Jesus came back, that I deserved hell. And I, without reservation, without doubt, without argument. Sure, I've gone through the religious motions before. Sure, I'd repeated the so-called sinner's prayer before. Sure, I'd heard the radio preacher say do these things. But every time I'd ever repeated that so-called sinner's prayer, or done anything of the sort, or tried to confess I'm a sinner to God, there was always the voice running around in my head going, I'm a pretty good person. I'm not a bad guy. And so there was no true heart confession. There was no agreement with God. But, of course, I didn't know these things at the time. I wasn't a church goer. I had no Bible exposure, very little other than the gospel itself. And so, I'm sitting up that night, and for the first time I'm recognizing if Jesus comes back, I absolutely know that I deserve hell. Look at your life. Look at the first girl this girl that you got pregnant. Look at how you've constantly been at odds with her. You constantly are fighting, and you were constantly fighting to see your son. Look at your wife. Look at how you're destroying something that was so innocent, so kind, so compassionate, and you are destroying this relationship and this marriage. Look at what you've done to your life, and I'm realizing I absolutely deserve hell. I know it without reservation. And so, as I sat there that night, I recognized and knew that I deserved hell. Again, having only that very limited exposure to like the radio preacher and stuff, I tried to muster up or tried to replicate or reproduce a sinner's prayer. You know the one. You've seen it. You've heard it. They lead you through this parroted prayer of essentially like... So I tried to muster up the most eloquent, flowery prayer that I could. And I'm verbally saying these things. And, oh, Lord, I'm a sinner and I believe you died on the cross for me and this and that. And I get to the end of this prayer and I'm still completely crushed under this weight of understanding and knowing that I deserve hell. And I remember thinking, I can't blame God. I wouldn't save me either. There was this resignation. I was resigned. I wasn't fighting against it. I wasn't like, oh, this isn't fair. No, it was totally fair. And I was resigned to hell. There's like, I know that's what I deserve and that's where I'm going to go. And as I'm sitting there in this resignation and in this realization that I deserve hell, I just thought, and it wasn't even a verbal thing. I just thought it. I remember thinking, Lord, if you don't save me, no one else can. All right, I'm on a work live stream here. I can't go to pieces. That's when Jesus saved me. When I knew that I couldn't save myself. And I knew I deserved hell. And I just confessed, if there's any salvation, Lord, it's in you. He saved me. And as you can see, it's been 11 years. And it hasn't gotten old. And I haven't gotten over it. So much of what you hear today in testimonies are religious stuff. This isn't religious stuff. This is Jesus who saved my soul. But everything changed from that day. The Lord saved my soul. The Lord rescued my life. I was different. Well, I've been different ever since. My marriage was rescued. My life was saved. I was kind to my wife. I treasure her now. But that isn't me. You know what I was. I just told you. It's because of what the difference he made in me. He changed me. Caused me to see my wife for what she was, an absolute treasure. Saved my kids from a divorce. Oh, saved so much. And then even that one that I talked about earlier that I had a kid with before I was married, who was an absolute nightmare to me for so many years. Years later, the Lord brought her in to a service that I was preaching. And I remember this. I remember the text I was preaching. I remember the subject. And I remember thinking I'll never see her again. And she kept coming back. But initially under the impression she was saved. She grew up religious. She had a religious past. So she kept coming. She kept hearing the preaching. You know, the Lord had taken care of some things between us to where we were peaceable. You know, so it wasn't a terrible inconvenience to have her there or anything, or it wasn't hard. But then she starts calling me at work, asking me questions. What's this mean? What's this mean? But all still under the guise of, yeah, but I'm a Christian too. Until one day she called me up and said, I'm lost. And I didn't have to convince her. The Lord had done that. And she continued in that condition for a couple years, until finally the Lord saved her. And then there's the son between us, who is the one that you guys hear about, Cooper, my oldest. The one that goes to work with me. The Lord saved him just this last May. And he's so much different. We had our struggles with him. The lying and the different things. And he's so much different. I mean, you can see there's real evidence that there's a change. That there's fruit. So, I wanted to communicate my testimony, even though I've made a sideshow of myself here. That this is what salvation looks like. There's so much religious confusion out there today. And I understand there are so many people that are so turned off to Christianity because there are so many bad actors within the circles of it, right? I get it. There's a lot of fakeness. There's a lot of, as the Bible puts it, there's a lot of tares among the wheat. Tares are poisonous grass that was sown amongst the wheat as a means to poison the ground, right? It's a likeness to how the devil is good at bringing in ones that know how to talk the talk and get in amongst the circles and spoil the opportunity to share the gospel with others because, those hypocrites over there. I get it. And I grew up that way. I grew up avoiding them, right? I didn't like Christians. I didn't hang around them. I avoided them. I was the partier. I was the drinker. I was the pot smoker. I steered clear. But this is what I'm talking about when I ask you, are you a different person? Are you a new creature in Christ? So I hope that this was communicated right. I hope that I didn't turn you off by making too much of a spectacle of myself. I didn't intend to do that. But I've never been the same. My life has changed. It's been rescued. And I give all the glory to God for it. It was because Jesus saved me that my life is what it is today. But anyways, I'm going to try to get myself composed again and go to work. And you guys have a good day.